The first morning I realized something was wrong, I knew it wasn't just another neighbor dispute. The sun had barely risen, and my daughter Emma was staring at me with wide eyes, her small hands trembling as she held the torn straps of her backpack. "Dad," she pushed me, she whispered, voice breaking. My stomach tightened. I had known HOA disputes could get ugly, but this was personal. My mind raced, recalling the countless warnings we'd received about Karen, the neighborhood's self-proclaimed enforcer of rules, always lurking, always judging. She had been watching us for months, nitpicking our lawn, our mailbox, even the way Emma tied her shoes. But attacking a child, that was crossing a line I wouldn't let anyone cross. I knelt down, looking into my daughter's fearful eyes, and made a silent promise. I would protect her. No one would get away with threatening my family. Karen's house sat 2 doors down, her front yard pristine, her roses perfectly pruned, but behind that facade lay a storm. I remembered the first time I met her during a neighborhood meeting. She smiled sweetly, nodding, but her eyes held calculation. Every word she spoke had a sharp edge, subtle but unmistakable. She didn't like people who didn't bend to her will. I had learned quickly not to argue, not to fight openly. But seeing her hands around Emma's backpack, shoving my daughter, ignited something deep inside me. I realized then that all those quiet days of enduring her nonsense, of biting my tongue during HOA meetings, had prepared me for this exact moment. My daughter was safe now, but Karen would learn exactly who she had provoked. Later that afternoon, I watched her from the edge of my driveway. Karen had stepped outside, checking her mailbox, completely unaware that I had already filed an official complaint, documented everything, and called in witnesses. But the real plan was something she couldn't see coming. I was the sheriff in this county, and while most people only knew me as the guy next door, I carried authority that couldn't be ignored. I let her think she was untouchable, letting her smug smile linger, while every ounce of patience in me was coiling like a spring. I wanted justice, but I also wanted her to understand the full weight of her choices. The next confrontation was inevitable. Karen had cornered Emma near the community pool, pointing and yelling, her voice sharp and unrelenting. Emma froze, unsure what to do, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the same fear in her eyes I once felt during my first day on the force. I stepped forward, my uniform hidden beneath a casual jacket, my badge tucked safely in my pocket. "Karen," I said calmly, voice steady but low, "enough." She turned, startled to see me so close, and for the first time, hesitation flickered across her face. My daughter clung to my leg, relief washing over her, but I could see the gears turning in Karen's mind. She didn't know who I really was. That night, I replayed the events over and over in my head. I thought about the other parents, the neighbors who whispered behind closed doors about Karen's overreach. I thought about my own moral compass, about how justice should always be measured but firm. I realized this was about more than just protecting my daughter. It was about standing up for every family that felt powerless under her relentless scrutiny. The tension built inside me, a mixture of fear, anger, and duty, like a fire that refused to die. I decided I wouldn't act impulsively. Instead, I would wait, watch, and then act with precision, like I had trained my entire career to do. The following morning, a note appeared in our mailbox, unsigned but dripping with menace. "You think you're safe? You're next." Emma's eyes widened as she read it, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Karen had no idea that the sheriff she had underestimated was standing right in front of her, reading her threats like an open book. I made a decision then: we would catch her in the act. Every move she made, every attempt to intimidate us would be recorded. I set up surveillance cameras, not just for evidence, but to protect my family. There was a rhythm to this plan, a calculated strategy that only someone with experience in law enforcement could execute. Days later, it all came to a head. Karen confronted Emma again, this time in the cul-de-sac, shouting and gesturing wildly. I stepped out from behind a parked car, my badge finally visible, and in that instant everything changed. Her mouth opened to shout, then froze. Recognition dawned slowly, panic replacing the usual arrogance in her eyes. You're the sheriff," she stammered. I nodded, my voice firm and unyielding. "And I don't tolerate threats to my family. Step away." The neighbors watched in stunned silence, witnessing the unmasking of the woman who had terrorized our little community. The lesson was clear. Some actions have consequences, and the truth has a way of coming to light in the most dramatic fashion. After that day, peace slowly returned. Karen retreated behind her perfectly pruned roses, avoiding confrontation. Emma felt safe again, and I felt a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served, not with anger but with authority and integrity. I reflected on the journey. Fear, anger, strategy, and patience all intertwined to protect what mattered most. Sometimes the strongest people are those who don't need to shout the loudest, who don't need to expose themselves until the right moment. And sometimes, karma has a way of catching up to even the most controlling neighbor. In the weeks that followed, the community began to shift. Parents whispered about the incident, but no one challenged me openly. Children played freely in the streets, laughter echoing where tension once ruled. I realized then that protection isn't just about enforcing rules, it's about creating space where fear doesn't take root. Watching Emma run across the lawn, smiling, safe in the knowledge that her father would always have her back, I understood a profound truth. Courage doesn't come from confrontation alone. It comes from knowing who you are, standing firm in your values, and acting decisively when the time is right. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds chirping, but my mind was far from peaceful. I couldn't shake the image of Karen's hand on Emma's backpack, her grip tight, her expression twisted with control. Every parent fears for their child, but that fear becomes sharper when the threat is so close, so deliberate. Emma sat at the kitchen table, picking at her cereal, pretending to be normal, but I could see the tremor in her hands. I knelt beside her and whispered, "You're safe now. I've got you." She looked up, eyes wide, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. That moment was a quiet victory, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Karen had always thrived on intimidation. She loved the power she wielded over the community, subtle, insidious, crushing anyone who dared step out of line. She didn't see herself as cruel. In her mind, she was enforcing order. But what she didn't realize is that order without empathy is just tyranny. And when she crossed the line and targeted my daughter, the game changed. My mind raced with possibilities. Surveillance footage, witness statements, documented complaints, everything was ready. But I needed more. I needed to understand her, to anticipate her moves, so that when the moment came, there would be no doubt, no escape. By mid-morning, I was walking the neighborhood, keeping my eyes discreetly on Karen's house. From behind the hedge, I watched her pruning her roses with meticulous precision, her lips tight with tension. The air seemed charged, every movement calculated. I realized something chilling. She had already sensed a shift. She didn't know my full plan, didn't know my badge was real, but she could feel the walls closing in. And that made her dangerous. I reminded myself to stay patient. Rash actions could escalate things further, and I couldn't risk putting Emma in harm's way again. Later that afternoon, the HOA sent another passive-aggressive note to our mailbox, complaining about some trivial violation. A flower pot slightly out of place, a trash can not aligned perfectly. The handwriting was familiar, looping, meticulous, dripping with condescension. But underneath the petty complaints, I could sense the threat. Karen was testing me, trying to provoke a reaction to see if fear would make me slip. But I didn't. I calmly documented everything, photographing the notes, saving them for the official record. Every threat she sent, every petty violation she reported, would become evidence of her obsession, of the way she tried to manipulate the neighborhood. By evening, I decided it was time for a quiet but firm lesson. I pulled Emma aside, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Remember what we talked about. Courage isn't about fighting with anger. It's about standing your ground and staying safe." She nodded, and for a moment, I saw her mother's eyes in her reflection, the same spark of determination, the same fire that refuses to be broken. I hugged her tightly, letting her feel the strength I carried as her father, her protector. She felt it, I could see it. That sense of safety, of knowing someone was watching over her, was priceless. That night, I stayed on my front porch, lights low, watching Karen's house from a distance. I could see shadows moving behind her curtains, hear faint whispers of her conversations, probably plotting her next move. And I realized something. Fear can be contagious, but so can resolve. The longer I remained calm, deliberate, and vigilant, the more unsettled she became. Her perfect roses, her pristine lawn, her imagined control, they were all fragile facades. And I, a father and sheriff, was quietly dismantling them, piece by piece, without anyone noticing, without causing a scene. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. The next day, as Emma left for school, Karen stepped onto the sidewalk, feigning civility. Her smile was sharp, forced, but her eyes betrayed impatience. "Good morning," she said, voice syrupy, dripping with false sweetness. I walked Emma past her calmly, holding her hand, and nodded politely. She recoiled slightly at my composure, the hidden authority I carried beneath the casual jacket, the unspoken warning in my posture. She didn't know it yet, but the game had changed. From that day forward, every attempt to intimidate, every sneer or pointed comment, would be met not with fear, but with quiet, unwavering resolve. Watching her retreat back into her home that morning, I felt a sense of cautious satisfaction. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time, Karen could feel the weight of someone who wouldn't be manipulated. Emma skipped ahead, smiling at the neighbor's dog, blissfully unaware of the strategy unfolding around her. And I realized something profound. Sometimes, the strongest lessons aren't delivered with anger. They're delivered with presence, with patience, with the quiet assurance that you will protect what you love, no matter what it takes. The following weekend, the air felt thick, almost electric. Emma wanted to play outside, her laughter a fragile shield against the looming shadow of Karen. I watched her from the porch, hands on my knees, muscles tense, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. And trouble, as always, had a way of finding her. Karen appeared, striding down the sidewalk with her usual exaggerated authority, clipboard in hand. She didn't even bother to hide the glare she directed toward Emma. My stomach tightened, but I stayed calm. Years on the force had trained me to manage fear, not suppress it, but control it. "Emma," Karen snapped, "you're leaving your toys in the wrong area again. That's against HOA rules." Her voice carried a mix of annoyance and self-righteousness, as if enforcing petty rules gave her real power. Emma froze, clutching a small stuffed bear, her tiny frame trembling. I stepped forward casually but firmly, keeping my voice low but commanding. "Karen, we've addressed this before. Emma knows the rules." I saw her jaw tight, her composure flickering for the first time. What Karen didn't know was that I had already alerted a few trusted neighbors. Quietly, discreetly, they had begun to notice the way she pushed and intimidated families, the way she weaponized authority for personal satisfaction. One by one, they had started keeping records, observing her patterns, and documenting her behavior. I didn't need to escalate things openly. The truth had a way of surfacing on its own, and it would, in a way she could never ignore. Karen's eyes darted toward the house's flanking ours, searching for witnesses, but I could see panic starting to creep in. My presence, quiet but resolute, was more intimidating than she expected. And yet, beneath that frustration, I sensed she was planning her next move. She wouldn't back down easily. That was her nature, always aggressive, always insistent, always wanting control. But what she didn't understand was that control is an illusion when someone is prepared, when someone is watching, and when someone has nothing to lose. Later that afternoon, Emma and I were in the backyard playing catch. I could see Karen's shadow at the window, lingering just long enough to make her point but not daring to confront us directly. I called Emma over and knelt beside her. "Remember, courage isn't about standing up to everyone at once. Sometimes it's about standing still, staying calm, and letting them see who you really are." She nodded, taking a deep breath, absorbing every word. I could see her confidence returning in small ways, her step steadier, her smile braver. By evening, I knew it was time to act. Karen had escalated things without even realizing it. Every note, every confrontation, every attempt to intimidate was now documented and organized. I wasn't just responding to her attacks. I was preparing to reveal her behavior to the entire HOA, to show the community the truth about the woman who had claimed authority but operated without conscience. I felt a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. Satisfying though it would be, the reveal had to be precise, timed perfectly, leaving no room for ambiguity. The next day, during the HOA meeting, the tension was palpable. Karen sat at the head of the room, clipboard clutched tightly, ready to assert her dominance. I entered quietly, nodding to neighbors, letting my presence speak before words did. As the meeting progressed, I presented the documented evidence, organized meticulously, photos, videos, notes from witnesses, and my own observations. Murmurs filled the room as the neighbors saw the pattern unfold. Repeated intimidation, harassment, and attacks aimed directly at Emma and others. Karen's face paled. Her mouth opened to respond, to dismiss the evidence, but the collective weight of proof, combined with the subtle authority I exuded, silenced her. One by one, neighbors spoke up, confirming the behaviors they had witnessed but previously feared confronting. Karen's carefully constructed facade began to crumble, layer by layer, until nothing remained but the truth. She had underestimated not only me but the community she thought she controlled. Walking home that evening, Emma skipped ahead, her hand in mine. She was lighter, somehow freer. I reflected on the power of patience, preparation, and unwavering protection. Sometimes courage isn't about confrontation alone, it's about strategy, observation, and the quiet assurance that justice will prevail. And in that moment, watching my daughter laugh without fear for the first time in weeks, I understood a profound truth. The strongest victories are those that protect the innocent while dismantling the arrogance of the powerful. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I realized Karen wasn't going to stop. Even after the HOA meeting, even after the neighbors had started whispering about her behavior, she still prowled the neighborhood like a storm cloud. I watched from the kitchen window as she strutted down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, scanning every lawn like a general inspecting troops. Her eyes landed on Emma, who was drawing with chalk on the driveway, and I felt that old tension rise in my chest. That protective instinct, the one that had driven me through every confrontation, ignited again. Emma looked up at me, her small face uncertain. "Dad, she's starring," she whispered. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "She can look all she wants, but she won't touch you, not while I'm here." My voice was calm, deliberate, but inside, adrenaline was surging. This wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was about protecting the innocence of my daughter, about making sure she felt safe in her own home. And I knew, deep down, Karen wouldn't stop until she thought she could win, or until she realized she never would. By mid-morning, I decided it was time to set boundaries, clear, unmistakable ones. I walked outside in plain clothes, just a casual jacket, but my presence carried weight. I approached Karen, whose expression shifted from smugness to surprise when she saw me calmly walking toward her. "Karen," I said evenly, "Emma is off limits. No more notes, no more confrontations, this ends now." Her eyes narrowed, lips curling into a forced smile. She tried to speak, but the steady tone in my voice, the quiet authority I radiated, stopped her mid-sentence. She had never met someone who could match her in patience, her calculation, and her silent power. Karen retreated behind her front door, but I knew it wasn't over. She was plotting, strategizing, trying to find some way to regain the control she had lost. And I welcomed it. Every attempt she made to intimidate us would only provide more evidence, more clarity for the truth everyone was slowly starting to see. Emma watched from the porch, gripping my hand, and I saw the flicker of confidence returning in her eyes. She understood, in her own way, that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's standing firm despite it. That evening, the neighborhood felt different. Conversations that once skirted around Karen's behavior now openly acknowledged it. Parents shared small stories of her overreach, children laughed and played more freely, and I could sense a subtle shift in power. Karen's carefully crafted image of authority was fracturing, and I had orchestrated it without a single public confrontation, without creating chaos. The quiet strength of preparation, patience, and strategic action was reshaping the neighborhood. But Karen didn't give up. That night, I found a note slipped under our door. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, precise, dripping with malice. "You think this is over, watch your daughter." My stomach clenched and I swallowed hard. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was personal. I held the note in my hands, feeling the weight of the threat, but I also felt resolve. Fear could not dictate my actions. If anything, it sharpened my focus. Every move from Karen would now be countered. Every attempt at intimidation documented, every shadowed step observed. The next day, I decided to take a proactive approach. I spoke with trusted neighbors individually, quietly sharing what had happened, giving them advice on how to document incidents without escalating. I watched as Karen's influence began to erode, not through confrontation, but through awareness. People who had been silent now had tools, guidance, and courage. And slowly, the balance of power shifted. Karen's attacks, once terrifying, were now met with calm observation, careful documentation, and collective vigilance. By late afternoon, Emma and I were back in the backyard, chalk and laughter filling the space. I watched her run freely, feeling the tension of previous weeks melt slightly with each step she took. Karen's figure appeared at the edge of the street again, but she paused, seeing neighbors outside, cameras quietly in place. Her presence no longer commanded fear. It only highlighted her isolation. And I realized, as I held Emma's hand and watched the world continue around us, that sometimes victory isn't about confrontation or force. It's about creating a world where fear cannot thrive. That night, I reflected on everything, the threats, the attacks, the tension, and I understood a truth I had long carried as a sheriff. True authority doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from integrity, from preparation, from quiet strength, and from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Karen had learned that lesson, whether she realized it or not. And Emma, blissfully unaware of the strategies unfolding around her, finally slept peacefully, knowing her father would always be her shield. The morning sun poured through the blinds, but it couldn't warm the unease I felt. Karen had escalated again, and this time it was subtle, almost sinister. A new note appeared on our doorstep. "We're watching, always." No signature, just those 4 words that carried more menace than any shouted threat. I held it in my hands, reading and rereading, feeling the weight of intimidation press down. Emma peeked from behind my legs, her eyes wide, and I knelt to her level. "It's just words," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Words can't hurt you if you know the truth." Truth, my badge, my authority, my unwavering protection, was the shield no one could penetrate. By mid-morning, I had made a plan. Karen had to believe she still had control, while I quietly tightened the noose. Cameras, witness statements, every minor violation she tried to weaponize, everything was logged meticulously. I knew Karen thrived on fear, but what she didn't know was that I could control the narrative without making a spectacle. And the most powerful part, Emma was safe, and she didn't even realize the strategy unfolding around her. That afternoon, Karen tried a direct approach. She blocked Emma near the mailbox, hands on her hips, eyes sharp with menace. "Your daughter's shoes are untied again, and that backpack completely unacceptable," she barked. Emma froze, unsure what to do. I stepped forward calmly, my presence enough to shift the energy. "Karen," I said, voice steady, "Emma is fine, step aside." Her face twisted, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. She could sense the authority she thought she had slipping through her fingers. I held Emma close, letting her feel the quiet power that comes from knowing someone will never let harm touch her. By evening, I realized the battle had moved beyond intimidation. It had become psychological. Karen was trying to provoke, to manipulate, to unsettle. But I had trained for moments like this my entire life. My career had been built on patience, observation, and controlled response. Now, in my own neighborhood, I used those same principles to protect my daughter, while keeping the HOA's meddler exposed for what she truly was. The air around her was electric with tension, but I stayed calm, letting every action be deliberate, every move calculated. The next day, I noticed a subtle shift. Karen's perfect composure faltered. Her morning walks were shorter, her gaze darted nervously toward our house, and the neighbors quietly started acknowledging the changes. They had seen her patterns, her overreach, and now they understood that the man next door, the father they had always waved to casually, was not to be underestimated. Her power over the neighborhood, once absolute, was now fragile, her authority questioned quietly but consistently. Then came the turning point. I arrived home to find Emma sitting on the porch steps, chalk drawings scattered around her. Karen appeared at the end of the driveway, clipboard clutched tightly, face red with frustration. "You think you can ignore me?" she demanded. I stepped out slowly, casually, my hand resting on my jacket pocket, the badge tucked inside. "I don't ignore threats," I said quietly, deliberately. "I handle them." Her jaw dropped slightly. eyes widening as the realization hit. She had underestimated me from the very beginning. Neighbors started appearing, curious, quietly observing the interaction. Karen's voice faltered. She tried to assert authority, but the room was silent except for the soft wind and the distant sound of children playing. The dynamic had shifted. I wasn't just a father protecting his daughter anymore. I was the embodiment of authority she could not challenge. And in that moment, she understood the full consequences of crossing a line that should never be crossed. Walking back inside with Emma, I let her chatter fill the hallway, her small voice a soothing reminder of what was truly at stake. The tension in the neighborhood had shifted, the balance altered. Karen's attacks, once terrifying, had been met with calm, deliberate resistance. Every whispered threat, every note slipped under our door, every attempt at intimidation had been recorded, documented, and countered. And the lesson was clear: strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks quietly behind a child, watches silently, and acts decisively when the time is right. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, I reflected on the journey. The fear, the anger, the planning, it had all been necessary. Courage isn't about recklessness, it's about measured, thoughtful action. And protection isn't just about shields and weapons, it's about being present, being vigilant, and ensuring that those who are most vulnerable can live without fear. Emma's soft, steady breathing reminded me why I fought, why I endured, and why I would continue to stand unwavering, no matter what came next. The next morning, the neighborhood felt tense, like the calm before a storm. I could sense it in the way Karen moved, her eyes darting nervously toward our house, her voice sharper with each conversation she had on the phone. Something inside me told me this was the day the facade would crumble completely. Emma played in the yard, blissfully unaware of the strategic chess game unfolding around her. I watched her, my chest tight with both pride and protectiveness. Today, Karen would learn the consequences of attacking a child, and she wouldn't be able to hide behind HOA rules or empty threats. By mid-morning, Karen approached, feigning civility, her clipboard held like a shield. "Morning," she said, voice syrupy, attempting control, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. I stepped outside casually, my stance firm, presence undeniable. "Morning, Karen," I replied, voice calm but heavy with quiet authority. "Everything's fine here as it should be. You're welcome to leave now." Her jaw tightened. She had prepared for confrontation after the HOA meeting, expecting fear or resistance, but not this quiet, unwavering resolve. Karen tried to regain control, pointing at Emma's chalk drawings scattered across the driveway. "This is completely unacceptable," she barked, but her words lacked conviction. I knelt to Emma's level, smiling at her, letting her know she was safe, letting Karen witness the bond between father and child that no threat could touch. "Emma's fine," I said, rising slowly. "And she will continue to be fine, whether or not you approve." The neighbors, who had begun watching discreetly from their porches, whispered among themselves. They were starting to see the full picture: the relentless intimidation, the petty harassment, the way one woman tried to control the entire street. By afternoon, I knew it was time to escalate the reveal. Karen had to confront not just me, but the weight of her actions. I invited a few trusted neighbors over, casually under the guise of a small gathering. Cameras were in place, quietly capturing every interaction. Karen, noticing the activity, approached again, her expression a mixture of curiosity and defensiveness. "What's all this?" she demanded. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "Just a small meeting, Karen." Neighbors sharing stories, concerns, community. Her hand twitched toward the clipboard, instinctively reaching for authority, but I stayed composed. Every movement had meaning, every glance was deliberate. As the gathering continued, I began to speak about community, about respect, and about boundaries. Slowly, carefully, I introduced the evidence: photographs, notes, recordings, all documenting her intimidation and harassment. The whispers grew louder. Neighbors nodded, confirming the accounts I presented, filling in gaps. Karen's confident smirk began to falter, replaced by panic. Her control, the one thing she had always wielded like a weapon, was slipping away. She realized that the truth, quietly accumulated and presented strategically, could not be denied. Then, in a quiet moment, I revealed what Karen had never known: my identity. I showed the badge tucked beneath my jacket, the authority she had underestimated from the very beginning. Gasps echoed through the small group. Karen's face turned pale. Her eyes darted from neighbor to neighbor, realizing that every action, every attempt to intimidate, had been observed by someone who could enforce real consequences. She had been blinded by arrogance, thinking fear was enough. But the truth, authority, and preparation had been on our side all along. By evening, the tension lifted. Karen retreated, her carefully constructed world of control unraveling. Emma ran freely across the lawn, laughing, chalk dust on her fingers, completely at ease. The neighbors began talking quietly, sharing stories and strategies, reclaiming their confidence. And I stood on the porch, watching, realizing a deeper truth. Courage is not about confrontation alone, it's about preparation, integrity, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The most profound victories are often quiet, deliberate, and unyielding. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me and whispered, "Dad, everything's okay now, right?" I smiled, brushing her hair from her forehead. "Yes, Emma, everything's okay, I promise." And as I turned off the light, I felt a calm I hadn't known in weeks, a sense that the storm had passed, at least for now, and that protection, patience, and quiet strength had won the day. The morning after the confrontation, the neighborhood felt lighter. The tension that had hung over every lawn, every mailbox, every whispered conversation, had begun to dissolve. Emma skipped ahead of me as we walked down the sidewalk, chalk dust on her hands, laughter spilling into the quiet morning. For the first time in weeks, her steps were unhesitant, free from the fear that Karen had tried to instill. I walked beside her, watching her face glow with innocence, feeling a quiet satisfaction swell inside me. Protecting her had never been just about rules or authority, it was about giving her space to grow without fear. Karen had not left the neighborhood, but her presence was diminished. She stayed behind her perfectly pruned roses, her hands idle, her clipboard forgotten. It was as if the weight of accountability had finally reached her, quiet but undeniable. I noticed neighbors observing her, whispering quietly, sharing stories of her past harassment. Their whispers were no longer fearful, they were informed, grounded, and empowered. I had created a ripple, subtle yet powerful, and the effect was undeniable. By mid-morning, I decided to walk the neighborhood, not out of confrontation, but out of reassurance. Families smiled as I passed, children waved, and neighbors thanked me quietly for standing firm. The HOA meetings, once a source of dread, now carried an undercurrent of respect. People had seen the consequences of unchecked power, the way intimidation corrodes trust, and the quiet authority of someone committed to justice had shifted the dynamic entirely. I walked past Karen's house deliberately, just enough to meet her gaze. She looked back, expression tight, no words spoken, but I could see the realization settling in. Her reign of fear had ended. Later that afternoon, Emma and I returned home to find neighbors quietly tending to their yards, the subtle hum of community life resuming. Children ran and laughed, their carefree joy a testament to the change that had occurred. Emma ran ahead, turning to wave at friends she hadn't played with openly for weeks. I watched her, heart swelling, realizing that protection isn't always about confrontation. It's about creating conditions where innocence can thrive, where fear cannot take root. The lesson I wanted Emma to learn was embedded in every moment. Courage is quiet, strategy is powerful, and integrity always prevails. That evening, the neighborhood began to shift more visibly. Neighbors spoke openly about their experiences with Karen, sharing observations that had once been whispered in private. Stories of petty harassment, intimidation, and overreach were now part of the collective memory, not isolated incidents. Karen, who had thrived on secrecy and manipulation, had no choice but to retreat further, her control stripped away by careful observation, quiet planning, and the undeniable presence of authority. The community had reclaimed its voice, its confidence, and its power. By nightfall, Emma and I sat on the porch, a warm breeze rustling the leaves. I watched the street empty slowly, the quiet of evening settling over the neighborhood. Emma leaned against me, whispering, "Dad, do you think she'll ever bother us again?" I smiled softly, stroking her hair. "I don't think so, kiddo, and even if she tries, you'll know we're prepared. Courage isn't about fighting every battle, it's about standing strong and knowing what you're capable of." She nodded, her small face relaxed and peaceful, and I felt the weight of the past weeks begin to lift. In that moment, I reflected on the journey, the fear, the tension, the strategy, the moments of doubt. Protection isn't always visible, it's measured, patient, and deliberate. Authority doesn't need to roar, it only needs to be present, consistent, and grounded in truth. And love, the kind of love that compels a parent to act decisively, is the most powerful force of all. Watching Emma sleep that night, safe, unafraid, I realized the battle had never really been against Karen alone. It had been about creating a space where innocence, courage, and community could thrive, and about showing that even the smallest acts of intimidation cannot overpower integrity and resolve. The following morning, the neighborhood felt transformed. The streets, once tense and quiet under Karen's shadow, now hummed with ordinary life, children riding bikes, neighbors exchanging smiles, dogs barking in the distance. Emma ran ahead of me, chalk dust clinging to her knees, laughter spilling freely. She looked back, her eyes bright, and I felt that deep, unshakable pride that comes from knowing you've kept someone safe. Protecting her had never been about winning an argument. It had been about ensuring she could live without fear. And now, finally, she could. Karen didn't appear that day, or the next. Her presence had diminished, not because I had shouted or threatened, but because the truth, quietly documented and revealed, had stripped away her authority. I knew she was watching from behind her curtains, maybe plotting, maybe stewing, but the game had changed irrevocably. What she hadn't realized from the start was that true power doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from integrity, preparation, and unwavering vigilance. She had underestimated me because she thought fear was enough, but she had forgotten that some people are quietly unbreakable. By mid-afternoon, the neighbors had begun reclaiming their streets. Conversations no longer whispered but carried openly, confidence in every tone. They shared stories, tips, and even laughter over small incidents that once would have caused panic. Children played freely, chalk drawings decorated driveways, and parents walked without glances over their shoulders. The sense of community, fractured by fear and manipulation, was slowly knitting itself back together. And I realized the victory wasn't just for Emma. It was for every family who had silently endured Karen's tyranny. That evening, Emma and I sat on the porch, the sun casting long, golden shadows across the street. She leaned against me and whispered, "Dad, did we win?" I smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "We did. But more than that, we made sure this is a place where people can feel safe. Courage isn't just about fighting, it's about protecting what matters most." She nodded, eyes heavy but peaceful, and I felt the quiet weight of fulfillment settle in. Watching her sleep that night, I understood a profound truth. The strongest victories are not always loud. Sometimes they're quiet, deliberate, and protective, like the shadow of a parent watching over a child. The next morning, Karen's house was empty. I don't know where she went, whether she left out of fear, frustration, or shame. It didn't matter. The lesson had been delivered. Intimidation, cruelty, and obsession have limits when met with strategy, patience, and integrity. The HOA meetings continued, but without her presence, the tension that had once gripped the community dissolved. Life returned to its natural rhythm, and Emma ran, laughed, and played without fear, a testament to the protection that had been quietly, relentlessly applied. Reflecting on the weeks that had passed, I realized the story wasn't just about confrontation. It was about vigilance, patience, and moral courage. True strength isn't loud. It doesn't need witnesses. It comes from knowing what you must protect, who you must protect it for, and acting decisively when the moment arrives. I had shielded Emma not with anger but with presence, not with threats but with planning, not with force but with integrity. And in that balance, I had found a kind of victory far more enduring than any single confrontation could deliver. As night fell, I tucked Emma into bed one last time, feeling the rise and fall of her chest, listening to her steady breathing. Outside, the neighborhood settled into quiet harmony. I knew that life would continue with challenges, with people like Karen lurking in shadows. But for now, the battle was over and the lesson was clear. Courage, vigilance, and love, the kind that protects without fail, are the strongest forces in the world. And sometimes, the smallest person, holding your hand, can inspire the fiercest protection and the most enduring triumph. I stepped outside one last time, looking at the street bathed in moonlight. A calm wind whispered through the trees, and I knew that no matter what came next, Emma would always be safe. Karen had underestimated me from the start, and the neighborhood had learned a vital truth. Tyranny can only thrive in silence. And when courage, patience, and unwavering vigilance rise in its place, even the strongest storms must eventually pass. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.